I am the Philosophical Bachelor, and today I want to talk about Philipp Mainländer's philosophy, which sees the destiny of the cosmos as a journey towards nothingness. Philipp Mainländer's ambition in his 1876 book, The Philosophy of Redemption, is nothing short of the history of the universe from its inception to its termination, and the theory of everything, covering physics, metaphysics, history, religion, and ethics. This is enticing, but be warned that his journey is dark, filled with death and suicide, and so if this may trigger you, please turn away now towards brighter things or seek help. In the beginning, there was only God. Was this God perfect? If so, then there will have been no need for any change at all to take place, since any change can only logically lead to a maintenance of the status quo of perfection, or to less perfection, because perfection, by definition, cannot be further perfected. It is the cosmological equivalent of asking, why fix what is not broken? Yet, there was change, as is evidenced by the fact of the universe's existence in all its multiplicity. The initial singular unity of God in the transcendent realm broke up into a multiplicity which is the origin of this immanent universe, after which there can be no more transcendent realm. God has died, and his death was the life of the world, explains Mainländer. Because this multiplicity came from an original unity, it retained a coherence, though it is now a dynamic coherence, where the disparate things affect one another through cause and effect. Each thing, though linked to every other thing through causation, is no longer one unified thing. Each thing, each element, each compound, each entity, inorganic or organic, all have a will to persist, a will to life even for the non-living things. But this will to life leads ultimately to death, and so is effectively an underlying will to death. While God may not be perfect in his being, he possessed perfect wisdom. With such perfect wisdom, he must have known that the creation of the universe will lead finally to its total demise, leading all, including God, to non-being. But yet he proceeded to fragment into the multiplicity of the universe. Non-being must simply have earned preference over supra-being, or else God in his perfect wisdom would not have chosen it, deduced Mainländer. Why must the universe finally become nothing? By considering the various classes of things in the universe, Mainländer concludes that the sum of force in the universe will weaken over time. Beginning with the inorganic, inorganic things strive to be in steady state. A gas expands until it is dissipated. Liquids spread out and solids try to get to a state of rest at the center under gravity. Once they get to their steady state, they are at rest and are effectively dead. For the organic, each individual living thing grows and develops, but its growth and development peaks and then deteriorates, finally leading to death and decay. It strives to persist, but is unable to do so perpetually in its current body, which must eventually break down and die. Living things thus aim to continue in a different way through reproduction, so that life and the will to life can continue through new bodies. Since human beings are also living things, this also applies to them, but in order to persist better, they come together to form societies, trading their subjugation for security. The forms of society pass through various stages, such as monarchy, aristocracy, feudalism, capitalism, socialism, and so on. Through competition between people and nations, Humankind progresses towards an ideal state. Once reached, since it is the peak, there is no further progress to be made. Mainländer does not talk about a decline from there, but instead thinks that the only movement left is towards non-being. The wise over the ages, through thought in the form of philosophy, religion, and science, come to realize that what they really want is complete peace of heart. Peace can be found in one's lifetime by effacing one's desires. By effacing one's desires, one can reduce one's suffering and hence achieve peace. In any case, both for the wise and the unwise, each individual's life ends in death, after which there is nothing left of that individual. There is no heaven or hell, since the kingdom of God is within you. From Luke 17:21. However, this peace of death is only then for that individual. Suffering continues for the children of those individuals. To stop that will mean that the individual has to curb his sex drive, becoming a virgin in order to not have offspring and therefore ending his lineage there, which will prevent their future suffering. Mainländer valorizes such a person for helping the universe to reach its ultimate completion sooner, calling him a wise hero. However, this is merely a faster way for the world to get to the final goal, which is an extinction of everything, a death for the universe and absolute nothingness. Regardless what everyone does, the universe will ultimately get there, to its complete annihilation. It is just a matter of sooner or later. Since Mainländer is a determinist, whatever one person does is in any case inevitable, just as he believes that the ultimate extinction of the universe resulting in absolute nothingness is inevitable. It is the inevitable end effect of the initial free decision of God to fragment his unity into a multiplicity, which thus formed the universe. I think a good way to understand Mainländer's philosophy of redemption is to consider it as a didactic expression for his pessimistic point of view, and not an entirely systematic argument. Hence, we will miss his point by taking an overly analytical approach to the text, since he will then have committed the logical fallacy of petitio principii by begging the question, where he assumes what he should have instead been proving. Instead, I think a more beneficial approach will be to consider to what extent his ideas may apply, even if his premises seem ungrounded. To take his findings as a challenge, perhaps even a provocation, and not a doctrine. Only Volume 1 of the 2-volume Philosophy of Redemption has been translated into English, and that volume is the only book of Mainländer's that is even translated. So I will proceed with my critique, which points may or may not have been addressed in Volume 2 or his other books. Mainländer's fundamental premise is that God wants to die, but cannot commit suicide directly because his essence prevents him from doing so. So God has to go about dying indirectly by fragmenting his original unity into a multiplicity. This is an act of freedom by the one and only being in existence at the beginning. The first, the only, and also the last free being, after which all the fragments can only play out their fate deterministically, since logically, or so it seems, all the fragments have to obey the inexorable law of cause and effect, with no power to deviate from it. According to Mainländer, how we know that God wants to die is because we empirically observe a universe of multiple things. Here, Mainländer radically departs from the creation stories of the various religions which he examines in the book, essentially inventing his own creation myth, though he does answer an age-old question. If God is perfect, why did he bother creating the universe, since a completely self-sufficient being does not need anything? Mainländer's God, if any, is the God of Christianity. But regardless, a circle can never be squared, even by one with infinite power. God cannot do all things, even if he is all-powerful, omniscient, and good, such as choose evil, make mistakes, or create a being more powerful than himself. He cannot commit suicide directly either, since his essence prevents that. Implicit in Mainländer's discourse is that the peace in nothingness, in non-being, is a peace that surpasses whatever peace that any being can have. Despite all of God's powers and bliss, there remains an even greater bliss, which is the bliss of nothingness. It is like saying that whatever stillness a living person can achieve still cannot beat the stillness of a non-living thing, and even better, a non-existent thing. Hence, to achieve that complete and perfect peace is simply to not exist, which in the case of a living being will mean to die completely. This line of thought regarding the exquisiteness of nothingness is not new, resonant in religions such as Buddhism and Taoism, which extols its value. Philosophers such as Epicurus tells us that death need not be feared. Socrates in Plato's dialogue Phaedo tells us that philosophizing is a preparation for death, where while he should not accelerate his time of death, he need not fear it because death is where he can shake off the shackles of his bodily form in order to better penetrate to the true form of things. That still presumes an afterlife in a Platonic realm of forms, but Mainländer's theory presumes that after one's death, the individual truly and completely perishes. Hence, while Mainländer borrows the idea of an all-powerful omniscient God from Christianity, he does not subscribe to its dogma of final judgment leading to heaven or hell. Instead, citing the Gospel of Luke, he points out that the kingdom of God, or hell, is already within each of us in our present lives. This is similar to the teachings of some schools of Buddhism of how nirvana is not a place to go, but is a state of mind, where the sense of self is extinguished, leading also to the extinguishment of suffering. According to Mainländer, even a utopia of the ideal state cannot save us, for after such a crowning achievement for humankind, all we can only look forward to is non-being. He does not accept the possibility that progress is endless, but thinks that we will hit our limits after which there is no further that can be gone. Neither does he think that progress is cyclical, with advancements and reversals letting existence proceed in perpetuity. Whatever we do or do not do, the universe will finally and inevitably reach complete annihilation. This view is substantiated by physics today, though not in his time, in its theory of the heat death of the universe. It tells us that in the distant future, the stars will have used up all their fuel and collapse, leading to a predominance of black holes. This will lead finally to a steady state of thermodynamic equilibrium across the expanse of space and hence maximum entropy. It corresponds with the existential angst that even if one became as great as Ozymandias, all achievements, all deeds, and all meaning will all come to naught ultimately. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Mainländer reasons that if the goal of God and of the universe is to ultimately die, then the arrival of this death sooner rather than later is better. This line of thought is, however, a non sequitur, where his conclusion does not follow from his premises. It merely reflects his self-professed pessimism when he suddenly shifts gears from the metaphysics of the cosmos to Hamlet's question of to be or not to be. Just because something will end does not imply it is better to hasten this ending. For instance, A shorter movie does not necessarily make it better than a longer movie. A shorter life is not necessarily better than a longer one. His own arguments do not bear out his pessimism, since if one had a longer life and was able to use that longer time to improve the world towards attaining the ideal state sooner, this person would have contributed more in accelerating the ultimate demise of the universe than merely dying sooner. His line of thought also has a dangerous implication. If the extinction of the universe is the aim, then harmful apocalyptic acts such as nuclear war or the destruction of the environment and climate should be welcome. Mainländer described his reading of Arthur Schopenhauer's The World as Will and Representation as a defining period in his life, and Schopenhauer's ideas clearly influenced Mainländer's thoughts in the philosophy of redemption. However, one key thing he did not follow Schopenhauer's teachings on is suicide. Mainländer killed himself in 1876 at the age of 34, the year the Philosophy of Redemption was published. For all his pessimism, Schopenhauer condemned suicide. Schopenhauer teaches that the way to liberation is to deny the will. For Schopenhauer, far from being a negation of the will, to commit suicide is to give in to one's will. He explains that in a suicidal person, the will realizes that its host is inept in being able to satisfy its strivings, and hence affirms itself through the very abolition of its appearance because it can no longer affirm itself in any other way. Suicide is an avoidance of suffering, but Schopenhauer thinks that a person who commits suicide to escape suffering is mistaken, because suffering is essential to life. Suffering is a part of life, the very essence of life, and avoiding it through suicide is not a victory over suffering, but is instead a capitulation to one's will, destroying life but not the will to life. According to Schopenhauer, suffering can lead us to the realization that the ultimate solution is the negation of the will. That is, to break the will and hence have redemption from the endless strivings of the will. Instead, the one who commits suicide is like a sick person who, having started undergoing a painful operation that could cure him completely, does not allow it to be completed and would rather stay sick, writes Schopenhauer. In many religious doctrines, suicide does not even avoid suffering because it is either a sin that leads one to eternal damnation and hence eternal suffering, such as in the Abrahamic religions, or results in bad karma leading to a poorer rebirth and hence more suffering, as taught in Hinduism and Buddhism. Even if we accept Mainländer's belief that death is the final ending of a person with only nothingness thereafter, it still does not follow that one should therefore hasten it. Because of his pessimism, he misses the opposing view that precisely because life is limited, it makes what time we have alive all the more precious, the opposite of worthless. He could have argued from the same premises that because nothingness is coming for us in any case, that we live as intensely as possible, be it in pursuit of pleasure the way the hedonists would advocate, to have many experiences as argued by the existentialist absurdist Albert Camus, pursue Sophia or wisdom as taught by Plato, seek ataraxia or tranquility as advocated by the Stoics, Epicureans, and the Skeptics, or pursue eudaimonia or human flourishing as taught by Aristotle. Jean-Paul Sartre writes that we only ever become complete when our being for itself finally coincides with our being in itself, but then our life is over. Death need not be viewed despairingly, but instead can be celebrated as the ultimate completion of one's life. Nothingness as the state of the ultimate completion of the universe can be a fitting culmination and conclusion to the tremendous epic of existence, a well-deserved perfect rest. When the state of nirvana, of extinguishment, is attained in Buddhism, The enlightened one discerns that birth is ended, the holy life fulfilled, the task done. There is nothing further for this world. However, for one to seek extinguishment when the holy life has not been fulfilled, when the task of one's life remains undone, seems like a regrettable moral failure. Besides, the extinguishment in nirvana is not death, but the extinguishment of one's ego, to live well because one now lives free from the tyranny of desire. Putting aside questions of veracity, even if we grant Mainländer his metaphysics, his conclusion of personal suicide does not follow. He seems to have thrown out the baby with the bathwater. Thank you for listening to the Philosophical Bachelor.